Hello, and welcome to the Global War on Terrorism Memorial podcast hosted by the American Legion. I'm your host, Jen Ballou, and it's my honor to welcome you home. Today, we are joined by General Xavier Brunson and Colonel retired Kirsten Brunson. General Brunson is the commander of the United Nations Command, Combined Forces Command, and United States Forces Korea at Camp Humphreys, Republic of Korea. General Brunson was commissioned as an infantry officer upon graduation from Hampton University with a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science. He also earned a Master of Arts in Human Resource Development from Webster University and a Master of Science in National Security Strategic Studies from the United States Army War College. He is a GWOT veteran, and his operational assignments have included service in Operations Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom, Freedom's Sentinel, and Inherent Resolve. Colonel retired Kirsten Brunson is a retired Army officer who served over 23 years on active duty in the Judge Advocate General Corps. In 2008, she became the first African-American woman to serve as a judge in the U.S. Army. Kirsten was inducted into the Army Women's Foundation Hall of Fame in 2021. In 2022, the Secretary of Defense appointed her as a member of the Military Justice Review Panel, a blue ribbon panel of military justice experts who advise Congress on issues related to the UCMJ, or Uniform Code of Military Justice. An active volunteer, Kirsten serves on the Design Advisory Council for the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation. She's a faculty member of the National Judicial College and does so much more. She's also the spouse of General Xavier Brunson, and they have 3 children. Sir, ma'am, welcome home, and thank you so much for being here today.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks, Jen.
So, in preparation for our time today, I was reflecting on the first time that I met both of you. And if my memory serves me correctly, sir, I think we met in the 2010, 2011 timeframe. You were the commander of the 525 BFSB at Fort Bragg, and I was working at the 18th Airborne Corps helping to stand up the resilience program there. And I remember that you were one of few senior leaders at that time at Fort Bragg who was really supportive of the resilience program. And I'm curious as to why that was. And if that openness to trying new things and not necessarily, we've always done it that way, so we're going to continue to do it that way, if that has something to do with where you are today.
That's exactly right. It was actually a little bit before that when I was the G3, and I thought I was going to get to deploy again. And that's when we met. And then I left the headquarters as you were working on the resilience work, and I went over to the 525. And so I just remember you being a dynamo, getting a lot of things done because it was ill-defined. We knew that there was a need for something to keep folks in the fight, so to speak, and to keep them coming to work after all the things that had gone on in terms of the Corps. Here goes the Corps again, leaving out the door. And they just turned it over to you and said, hey, set up this resilience directorate. And all they really gave you was office space in the little building behind the headquarters. And they said, figure it out. But I think, one of the things that had me really thinking about resilience is I served in a unit within USASOC where you would deploy for 90 days and you'd come home for, maybe 6 months, and then you were going right back again. And I saw that there was particular attention paid to the physical, mental, spiritual well-being of folks in that unit, that they might be able to do the high-level things they were doing. And so I said, well, why doesn't everybody do that? And sometimes it's easy to talk about a thing, but not to actually do it. And so I would applaud you for your efforts, which paid huge dividends for folks within the 18th Airborne Corps who were on the heels and the toes, I guess you would call it, of a back-to-back deployment. And
Hmm.
so I think seeing the art of the possible is what really opened me up to that, to say that it doesn't have to be this way always. We can change it by taking some actions.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And Kirsten, I knew of you all that time, but I never had the privilege to meet you until many years later when you and I both were now out of uniform. And it was in Dallas, Texas, for your engagement with our president and CEO, Michael Rodriguez, in support of the design of our future memorial. Like, what are some of the things that you remember most about that time in Dallas?
Oh, wow. Um, First of all, just the incredible group of people that had been assembled and from so many, I'll say genres, for lack of a better word, different experiences, different connections to the global war on terrorism. Everybody wasn't necessarily an active duty service member. You know, there were children of service members, there were civilians, and it seems kind of trite, but everybody has a story. And bringing those people together and listening to their stories, and everybody felt strongly about this project. It was just a really great place to be. Um,
Mm.
I can remember when Rod first called me. He just, he said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about something," and of course, sure. And he's just telling me about this, and I'm just listening in wonder. Right, this is great. And then the last thing I expected, I want you to be a part of it. Wait, what? So, as I am now, I was just honored to be invited. Just an incredible group of people, and I'm honored to be a part of that and to create something or be a part of creating something like this memorial that's going to be everlasting.
Rod has a knack for ambushing people. I think he learned those tactics in the Army and he continues them today. So I always laugh because everyone tells a similar story about, he wanted to give you an update on, his work. And then he ends it with, "I want you to be a part of it." It's just, it's beautiful to hear. I want to rewind a little bit and ask you both, you both wore the uniform post 9/11, and sir, you obviously continue to wear the uniform. During that time, though, when you both wore the uniform and you were raising children and obviously have stellar careers, what were some of your biggest personal and professional challenges and successes? And whoever wants to go first can go first.
The single biggest challenge was, having young kids when their father was deployed in a war. There's no way you can hide that. And I'm not sure you should. I mean, the first time he deployed in 2003,
Mm-hmm.
our kids were 2 and 4 years old. And so, you're never really quite sure how much they understand or what they understand, and you want to shield them from some of it. But just from, for the next 20 years going through that, and him not being there. So having to fill in, having to explain, why he isn't here. The kids not having their father for a good chunk of their lives, missing important milestones. And obviously being on active duty, I was exhausted. I did not ever deploy. I say my husband deployed enough for everybody, and that's not just me, for everybody. Uh, but having to hold down the fort and still, be in the Army and serve during that period of time with all the things that were going on, and yet also trying to give my children a normal life and a normal upbringing where they can still do sports and theater and all the things that they want to do and try to keep some sense of normalcy. And oh, by the way, your father's gone again. So that was my biggest challenge, just trying to create a stable home life for them.
And how about successes or a success of, like, when you look back on that time, what was one of the biggest successes?
I mean, I guess for a parent, the biggest success is that they grew up well.
Mm.
They did it. They got to do so many different things. Again, I'm tired, Uh, but, they did all the activities and they found the things that they loved and they were able to go out in the world and do things. And it's funny now because our daughters are adults, but listening to them talk and hearing them kind of parrot some of the things that we used to say or seeing how they engage with other people. It's really neat to watch because you know where they learned it. You know that we talk about military kids having resilience, and they absolutely do. They absolutely do. You might not see it as they're growing up, but once they're out of your house and you can see what they can accomplish on their own, it's an amazing thing. So yeah, that's my biggest success right there.
Thank you for sharing. How about you, sir?
The biggest challenge and the biggest success for me, it all has to do with my faith. I never really worried about things there and couldn't understand sometimes how folks would be concerned. Like my mom. My mom is like, she can worry and pray at the same time. That's how she does stuff. I never had any concerns about things at home, but I would attribute my greatest successes and some of my greatest challenges to operating in those environments with faith. To recognize that despite some things that I've seen that it's not really the way things are supposed to be. Young people should not be maimed and marred and dead. They shouldn't be. That's not the way things are supposed to be. But to have this faith, this burgeoning faith that's continuing to grow every time you go out the door allows you to do those things. And then too, the admiration that I have for my wife by virtue of the things that she did, every time I was out, whether it's cool guy stuff or regular guy stuff, my wife is at home taking care of my family. And I never, because I knew guys who were deployed that had concerns about that. Whether the sanctity of the relationship was going to be there for them or whether their kids were out running the streets or being cared for. I never had those concerns. All my concerns were always in front of me. And generally what was in front of me was not a good thing, but I also had people behind me that were pushing me along. Everybody comes back from that change. You just do. And I will tell you that the grounding of faith was developed from 2003 to 2018, which was the last time I deployed. It was renewed every time because my faith had to be in my wife, and my faith had to be in the unit I was a member of. My faith had to be in my God to protect me. And it seemed to somehow get easier over time. But that's because that march to getting to the point where you could claim a success, what might have been a challenge before. I can remember I had a Bible in 2003 during OIF1, right? It was like in my rucksack along with my little bandana with Psalm 91 on it, and I'd treat it like a talisman and I'd put it in my pocket and you get in a vehicle and you just pull it out and you read Psalm 91. But I hadn't touched the Bible all week. But I would do that to sort of shore myself up. But I never had any concerns about anything in my home. So.
What a blessing. Thank you both for sharing. And Kirsten, you mentioned, Rod calling you and inviting you to be a part of the Design Advisory Council. But I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more to just what it means to you that your voice, that your stories are shaping a national war memorial, a part of American history. Like, what does that mean to you?
See, when you say it like that, it blows my mind. I mean, I'm grateful, obviously, to be a part of that and to be able to add my stories and my perspective. My overwhelming thought and hope for this memorial has always been that it be a place for everybody, for every American, because every American was touched by the global war on terrorism. Every American was touched by 9/11 in some kind of way. And you didn't have to serve in the military to be affected by it. And so I think including all of those stories and all of those perspectives is what's going to make this an incredible memorial. And so if my voice and my stories add any new perspective, any twist, any part that's not included somewhere else, then I think that's very important. I know we have family members that are part of the Design Advisory Council, and I think that's so important. I always try to bring in my children's perspectives to the extent that I know them, what they were going through and things that they've shared with me during that period of the war. Because I do think that's important that it represent all Americans. Yes, our service members, especially the ones that deployed, gave so much more. But that war affected all of us, and I think this memorial is going to exist for all of us. It can be a place of learning, a place of education, a place of healing, and just a place of remembrance, and that's for everybody.
It is. It is. And it's interesting because that was where I was going to go next. But before I do, sir, I'm curious, when Kirsten shared this opportunity with you, that she was going to be a part of the Design Advisory Council, like, what were your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
Well, I will tell you that in the work that she's been doing along with this, I find out certain things. And we had a conversation about another interview that she had done. And I found out there's a lot of things I haven't revisited about that experience. Some good things, some bad things that I just keep moving forward on. And so when I thought about that, the first thing I thought of was it didn't matter what year I was in Iraq or Afghanistan. It did not matter. The heat when you come off of a plane, of a C-17 that greets you, and it could be midnight or it could be early in the morning, that heat. It doesn't matter what you all make. The monument can look like a waterfall. Kirsten could say, hey, it's going to be a waterfall. And in the waterfall, you're going to see people holding hands and you'll see the towers brought back. It could be whatever. But when I look at that, when I think about that experience, it's the heat on my face that I feel even now as I talk about it. I think about that, the acrid smells in the air, the just the feeling your nose like it's drying out immediately as soon as you get on the ground. And it's that feeling alone that I could be napping somewhere and I could wake up and be like, boom, there it is again. My throat's dry, my nose is dry. But to know that my wife is a part of that, telling a story that's always going to be, and telling it from a different perspective. More often than not, when we talk about something that memorializes a conflict, it's about the more martial aspects of that conflict. It's never about those who remain, those who are left behind. And that can be left behind literally or even figuratively. But there's something that's important about the families. I wasn't in Korea. I wasn't in Vietnam. I wasn't in Grenada. I wasn't even in Desert Storm. Okay. But I think that what's so significant about the global war on terrorism is it fundamentally changed the way that we lived. I can remember when you could just drive through Fort Bragg if you wanted to. Nobody was checking an ID card. Nobody cared. You just drive straight on through that base. But to see fences go up, my wife fighting to, that story's got to be in there. My wife fighting to get to PT on time just because somebody took down towers and she's got to get to work still. Nobody knew what that was going to look like, and being stuck in a line at a gate for hours and hours. And then I think this monument will also help people who didn't experience it but are living through it now. It'll help them to understand and appreciate that, you know what, it might take me a little bit longer to get my luggage, off the carousel or get into my flight. But that's because of what happened to the world that changed it so fundamentally. And I hope that it also helps people not to forget that there could be seminal changes to a nation and to her people by virtue of one heinous act. And then the 20 years that we dealt with that, deploying and the loss, all those things, I would almost have to say, like, if there was a big ceremony, I couldn't even go there with her because I don't know what my emotions would be like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you both have touched on it multiple times that this memorial will honor all of those men and women who served and sacrificed. So, of course, the uniformed wearing men and women, but also we refer to them as non-uniformed wearing men and women, people in the FBI, CIA,
Yeah.
all of those groups of people, those who didn't come home, absolutely, but the families who supported us, and those who came home but lost their lives in other ways, perhaps to suicide or cancer. So it's really important to us that we tell the whole story. And that's why, Kirsten, we have so many different representatives on the Design Advisory Council so that those who are designing it can be inspired by real stories of those who have been impacted by this war. We'll start with you, Kirsten. What would you say to either a veteran or a family member who served and or sacrificed in the global war on terrorism, who feel it was all for nothing? What would you say to them?
Wow. That's wow. Um, First, I see you. I won't pretend to fully be able to grasp what you have or are going through, but just know that I see you and that many, many others see you, and that this memorial is for you. It is to recognize all of the sacrifices, all of the pain, all of the successes, and that we recognize, just like Xavier was saying, that our world fundamentally changed after 9/11. And so anything and everything that you gave contributed to us coming out on the other side and coming out stronger.
How about you, sir?
It seems trite because you hear about thank you for your service so much. But to identify with someone and say, I know that place, I was there too. To share with somebody, um, man, you might not feel like it meant anything, but you did what so many won't do. You did your duty on behalf of the nation, whether that's a CIA analyst, whether that's a family member, whether that's somebody in the FBI, whether it's someone who carried a rifle into battle, whether it's somebody who lost a limb, that we might live the way that we do, that we might be a nation that of soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines who say, I'm going to support and defend the Constitution, to tell them that they've done what the Republic needed of them at that time. They did their duty. Duty doesn't care really how you feel. What duty says is that you were willing to do something that no one else would do or couldn't do for themselves. And so I think that a lot of times we forget how honorable duty is. And we listen to people that don't have the same experiences. And I'm not denigrating not having those experiences, but what I'm saying is that as people who have worn the cloth of the nation, there's a sense of duty and selfless service that ought always be honored. It's never about the result. It's not a PT test. It's not an APFT. This is service to the nation, and that ought to be honored always. But it's about duty. Thank you for doing your duty. Thank you for doing what was asked of you at a time when, as a nation, we had been harmed, that you were willing to stand in the gap. For those families that waited for people to come home, thanks for sticking with your soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine. And that's what I hope people should be able to draw from this thing. Almost a sense, Jen, of I did that. By virtue of my actions, I did that. I've seen all the memorials. And I think about my dad the first time he saw both the Martin Luther King Memorial and the first time he saw the Vietnam Memorial. And the time he spent walking down that line. Or we're on the Army 10 miler. My dad's famous for taking breaks on the 10 miler, okay? Or, hey, I'm going to just wait and catch up with Kirsten when she comes through. So you guys go ahead. him getting into that Martin Luther King Memorial and stopping and just stopping and walking and reading every plaque. And I can remember thinking with my brothers and myself, this isn't about him taking a break. This is about him thinking about something that he lived through. It was visceral. It meant something to him. And so it's just duty. I think it's got to celebrate the duty that people did to get our nation through a tough period of time.
Yeah, so well said. You know, we're also building this memorial. So the global war on terrorism is not over. Like, sure, we're not in Afghanistan anymore, but we still have troops deployed in support of the global war on terrorism. And many Americans don't realize that. Furthermore, we're building a memorial for a war that continues, that is not over. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are. This is for either or both of you. What are your thoughts on why now? Like, why is it important to build this now?
A lot of things have become normalized. All the changes, that were big, huge, life-changing events at the time have become normalized. Um, School kids today, of course you have to, take off your shoes when you go through security at the airport. They've always done that. We haven't always done that. That was huge. And so as things become normalized, you forget why we did them. And if we don't recognize, we don't stop and say, this is what happened. This is why we do those things. This is how the world changed. This is who got us through. Then we forget. And, 20 more years in the future, this will just be everyday life. And it won't mean anything. It won't matter because it won't have a source. So that's why I think the memorial is important.
Yeah, I think there's something, when you go along the National Mall, I think there's something special about recognizing what people have done for the nation. And I look now here at, I guess, was this year the 81st anniversary of D-Day? And there's still some folk who are hanging on. Imagine if that groundswell had happened 20 years post the first involvement. Maybe in 42 or 43, maybe by 1950, we had these memorials up. And there's a thing about giving people flowers while they're here. This memorial will give the opportunity for folks to revisit those times and things done that we as a nation wouldn't have to live in fear from an adversary striking us on our shores again. And I think telling that story now, every monument has a story with it. It's got to be the first time I've ever seen anything come to fruition this quickly. And the rich stories that can be told, the living history that's still around that can be shared by Americans and people around the world, because as you mentioned, the global war on terrorism still goes on. And people around the globe have benefited from the actions taken by a great many nations. But to be able to share those stories, temporally, like when it should be, like now's the time. Because more often than not, what happens is we're beyond that. And that normalization that Kirsten was talking about starts to occur, and it's not quite as important anymore. You don't recognize that there was a cost paid that you might have safer air travel. There is a cost paid that buildings are set in a certain way and you can only get so close to a building now. That security that folks enjoy, they ought to know why they have that. And I think it's just important to tell this story now.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. We talk internally amongst the foundation leadership that we know that this memorial will save lives. And you might have noticed at the beginning of the podcast, I said, welcome home, because one of the things that we've started doing is referring to the future site and ultimately the memorial as our home. We want it to be a home for everyone, a place to gather, to share stories, all of the things that you just mentioned. But back to that saving lives piece, we feel really strongly that it's going to save lives. And I'm wondering, when you hear that, what comes up for you?
As you were talking, the image I get is my dad seeing a guy, seeing a name of a guy on the Vietnam War Memorial. And he pointed to the name, and another gentleman that was a Vietnam veteran came through, and they talked about where they were. And they came together, and those that I don't know, but you can extrapolate from that these two men from different places of different races sat together and they talked to the point where I grabbed my son, who was much younger, and I said, "Come on, man, we're going to go up here to the bench and sit down." But they sat there and they talked. And you don't know what happened from that conversation, but it might have made somebody feel like they were home. They were at that memorial and they were home. And he might have put them at peace. But I just remember when my dad came away from there, he goes, "Yeah, that guy was in Vietnam the same time I was, 65, 67. And yeah, we were talking about these places, man." He said, "Sorry about that." But I remember how excited he was. And it was shortly thereafter, Kirsten, that he started wearing that Vietnam veteran hat.
I don't think he's taken it off since.
But the potential to save lives by having conversations, it's like your story, Jen, that you continue to thrive. Your story helps people. And there are those left behind that are in situations that aren't like yours, that resilience that you have, that drive that you have. To continue to move forward for your family. See, those are the kind of stories that I would hope in the future are shared at that site. Hey, you were in Ramadi? I was in Ramadi. When were you there? I was in Fallujah. Were you up in Kurdistan? Yeah, I was up there too. Were you in the Korengal Valley? Yeah, I was in the Korengal Valley the first time. And then I went back a year later. But those things, that sort of verisimilitude that we have in our service. Yeah, I wasn't in Iraq, but I was in Afghanistan, man, that same year. Let me tell you what, those stories kind of keep you like, you know what? I'm not alone. Yeah. I'm not alone.
Right.
There are other people that feel just like I do.
And Kirsten, what do you think? I mean, about still on this saving lives topic, as a retired Army colonel, but also as a family member, knowing that this memorial will also honor the families, how do you think that will translate to them?
As you were asking me that question, I started thinking of, the perspective of a family member who lost their service member after the fight. And what could this memorial be for them? I mean, everything, right? It just, and again, it's just imagine, like, what are all the emotions? Is there anger? Is there anger, sadness, whatever the emotions are behind that. So you came home from the war, but you never really came home, and then we lost you. So for them to be able to go to a place which celebrates, which salutes the service that their family member gave, and helps them to better understand what they were going through. And, like Xavier was saying, maybe talk to other people who can help them understand what their service member was going through. Maybe talk to other people who are going through what they're going through because they're visiting the memorial for the same reason. This thing is so important to so many people, and I hope people really do understand this is not a memorial to celebrate a war. This is so much bigger and better than that. This is to recognize the sacrifices. This is to educate. This is to remember, to honor, but it's also to heal. And so I think it can do that for, especially for those families who are struggling with even understanding. Like you asked before, what did we accomplish? Was it worth it? Did it even matter? I think it can help with that. I hope it can.
I hope so too. So I have one final question for each of you. I'm wondering if you can imagine dedication day or your first time visiting this completed Global War on Terrorism Memorial. What do you hope to feel in that experience?
Pride that I was a part of it. I imagine taking my kids there, uh, and really just listening and seeing what they take from it. When this thing comes to fruition, looking around at everybody who's there, everybody, the service members, the non-uniformed civilians, the family members, and seeing probably something different on all of their faces and being so thankful that we got it done. And then giving my husband a big hug for what he's going through.
Yes.
The real story of this for me will be the names that we carry with us as we walk through. And everyone that served over there has a name. Some have more names than other folk, but they'll be able to leave them there. They won't have to carry that anymore. So to your point earlier about saving lives may be saved because they'll be able to close out that chapter. Like I said, I don't spend a lot of time thinking on this. But what this conversation has brought up for me is just thinking about those people who, you always say never forget. And it sometimes takes people to remind you of those people that they not be forgotten. So, yeah.
On that note, I just feel compelled to share that today, the day that we're pre-recording this episode, is the 15-year anniversary of the day that my husband, Staff Sergeant Eduardo Laredo, was killed in action. And just as you were sharing that, I just want to say thank you, and couldn't agree more that his and many other names will be at the top of my mind that day and moving forward. Sir, ma'am, welcome home. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. It really means a lot. And I hope to speak with you both soon. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Love you, Kat. Thanks, Jen.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay.
Welcome Home is produced by Jennifer Blum, Holly Soria, and me, Jennifer Ballou. Our operations manager is Henry Howard. Art for Welcome Home is by Minerva Consulting. Our theme, A Place Like Home, is by Birgensen Lundberg via Epidemic Sound. Mixing and editing is by Jennifer Blum. Thank you to Tango Alpha Lima Podcast and the American Legion for their collaboration on this inaugural series. You can find their episodes, guests, and more at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima. You can find out more about the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation, get updates on the National War Memorial, and learn how you can get involved by following us on your favorite social media platforms or by visiting GWOT Memorial Foundation.org.